Welcome to the Music is the Best podcast with Sean and Tyson.
Hi, welcome to Music is the Best podcast with
Sean
and Tyson. So Sean, you've been listening to a lot of music lately, as have I. What have you been listening to lately?
I've been listening to some Pink Floyd lately, like Wish You Were Here. That's a fantastic record.
Very good record.
This morning I listened to Breakfast in America by Supertramp. That's got it's a great album. It has three of my favorite of their songs on it.
Which three of those?
The Logical Song, Breakfast in America, and Take the Long Way Home.
Oh yes, that's a favorite of mine too, actually.
All of which are still classic radio staples.
Oh yeah.
Goodbye Stranger as well. You got to throw that one in.
That song always kind of threw me because I always thought that the falsetto part on that was the bloody well right guys doing the falsetto on Goodbye Stranger, and I'm like, what?
There's also a song called My Kind of Lady where all the vocals on that are done by Rick Davies as well, and that's on Famous Last Words. Interestingly though, on the same album, the song Gone Hollywood it's a Rick Davies song, but you can totally hear Roger Hodgson during the If We Only Had Time section. It wasn't any kind of, I'm gonna sing all the vocals on this.
It's weird how sometimes that ends up happening with bands, right? Like, they start out collaborative, and then somebody takes the forefront, like Roger Waters, A Requiem for a Post-War Dream by Roger Waters, and little tiny letters underneath it, featuring music by the Pink Floyd.
To the extent where Roger starts kicking people out of the band and then making deals with David Gilmour so he wouldn't have his name included on the production credits, even though he was involved.
Yeah. It's kind of weird how, well, like Pink Floyd, for example, like how the dynamic sort of changed. First of all, it was like Syd Barrett's band, did all the songwriting, whatever, and then slowly they find a good formula in which his replacement, David Gilmour and Roger, they were kind of writing tunes, and Roger started kind of coming up with the lyrical ideas.
And then overall concepts for an album like Dark Side of the Moon.
Finally, he starts kind of writing for the band, well, I don't have anything, do you have anything? What?
I got a whole album here.
I got two. Here, you can either have The Wall, or you can have Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. Which one do you want to work on?
The Wall. Okay, definitely The Wall.
Oh, okay, guys. All right, fine. And we'll get a producer.
And I think they made the right choice.
It's weird because Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, ultimately it still comes off sounding like Floyd, only you got like Eric Clapton
Instead of
Gilmour. And it's like he's kind of doing the Gilmour-y things, but he finishes off like a Clapton flourish. And it's...
He can't not. I mean, you can't tell Eric Clapton, all right, play like David Gilmour. He won't do it.
But it ended up sounding kind of off. Like, not unlike the first Roger-less Floyd album, Momentary Lapse of Reason, which you've had a rediscovery of, a renaissance of recently.
Yeah. I mean, when I first heard that album, I was in the hospital I was having problems with my knee. This was when I was a teenager, basically. And I had it on cassette, and I listened to it, and I thought it was pretty good. Then I got rid of the cassette, as you do, as when you're young, you get rid of stuff. And then I never ever bought it on CD until like this week. Then I bought it on CD, and I listened to it, and I thought, you know what? This is actually not bad.
Yeah, I've been sort of reevaluating a lot of Pink Floyd. When it comes to records like Momentary Lapse of Reason, they get crapped on a lot by, like, the diehard Floyd fans. I thought I was a diehard Floyd fan until that giant $800 box set came out. And having exhaustively gone through it,
careful with that Exogene version 1, careful with that Exogene version 2, 3, 4, 5.
27. I discovered I wasn't the Floyd fan that I thought I was. But that's okay.
Well, that's the thing. you can have all the regular albums and still class yourself as a Floyd fan. I got the 2-disc version of the box set. That's good enough for me because I don't have $1,000 to plunk down for 27 discs and some fancy extra shit.
When I first heard Momentary Lapse of Reason, this was back in the 90s. I was getting into Pink Floyd. A lot of my friends in high school got me into Pink Floyd. And a lot of, so-called Floyd fans shit on it because it was essentially David Gilmour and a bunch of session guys. Nick Mason being the only other member left at the time, sort of plays on it, but there's just a lot of session people, a lot of extra writers, and at the time I may have bought into that. I read all the Floyd books and all the backstory involved in that, and listening to it more recently, as Sean has been, with sort of fresh ears and an open mind, and it's like Pink Floyd, it's like Diet Floyd, but I mean it still sounds like Floyd. There's still some good, really good music on it.
Well, I think side 1 is generally stronger than side 2 because side 1, you got some good real songs like Learning to Fly, that's a good song. Dogs of War is better than I originally thought it was. I don't mind it anymore. One Slip, I actually found myself kind of singing along with it.
Oh, wow.
And I was going to say One of My Turns, but I meant On the Turning Away.
On the Turning Away. That's like the anthem. That's like the get your lighters out. Oh.
And here comes another great Gilmour solo. Our buddy Simon really likes that song. I remember him telling me that's one of his favorite songs lyrically. But side 2 begins and ends fine with Yet Another Movie and Sorrow, but in the middle you got things like A New Machine, which is like David Gilmour sort of doing the vocoder a cappella but with synths kind of thing.
It's trying to kind of call back to Welcome to the Machine, but it's a new machine, but it tried to sort of ape the flow of like Wish You Were Here, with like kind of the river at the beginning and
the wind coming in between Wish You Were Here and Shine On parts 6 through 9. But yeah, those two, New Machine 1 and 2, bookend a piece called Terminal Frost, which is a pleasant enough instrumental, but it's obviously side 2 has a little bit more filler, I find. But then you get Sorrow, which is probably the centerpiece of the album, and probably, arguably, the best song on the album, or at least the best known.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Sorrow is probably, and it's kind of the most Floydian.
Yeah. And the funny thing about that song is I had never heard either Delicate Sound of Thunder or Momentary Lapse of Reason, and then I remember Much Music was showing the Nebworth 90 special.
Okay, yeah.
And they did Pink Floyd did, Run Like Hell, Comfortably Numb, and then they did this one song that I was like, what song is that? Where's that? And it turned out to be Sorrow. So, those are kind of my memories of that album. Momentary Lapse.
Yeah, like, it was just one of the albums for me in the Shine On box set, and Shine On box set is kind of interesting because it's by no means a comprehensive Floyd box, but it's got enough of the classics in there. The earliest album I think with it is Saucerful of Secrets. It kind of goes Saucerful to Momentary Lapse, but there's albums missing in between, like it skips
Adam Heart Mother,
more, no Obscured by Clouds, or Relics. So it goes like, it's 1968, skip ahead to 71 with Metal. Then the very next record, instead of Obscured by Clouds, is, it's a steady run though from Dark Side of the Moon up to Obscured by Clouds, except for Final Cut.
You mean from Dark Side of the Moon up to...
Like The Wall.
The Wall,
yeah.
Not Obscured by Clouds.
Yeah, sorry. But,
Edit.
No, it's I sit corrected. Anyways, yeah, no, it's a steady run of albums from Dark Side up to The Wall, and then it cuts out
The
Final Cut.
Because that's Roger's album, mainly.
And then, of course, gotta have
Momentary
Lapse, which is Gilmore's album, and he's still kind of the honcho.
And then there's the early singles.
Yeah, that's and that's a good sort of album in its own right. You know, you got again the early Syd Barrett stuff, but then you got some cool B-sides like Paint Box, or some of the post Syd Barrett singles like Point Me at the Sky, and
Wouldn't it be?
it would be so nice. Wouldn't it be so nice? It would be so nice.
What am I must be on the Beach Boys for some reason. We're talking about Pink Floyd. Come on, Sean, get with it.
But yeah, so that was my sort of initial brush with Momentary Lapse. It was like my least favorite album out of the box, that kind of thing. And just, I guess, over the years, it's sort of been one of my more neglected, but then going back to like listening to some of the Roger stuff. And this week too, I've been revisiting a lot of David Gilmour's solo records. Like I listened to David Gilmour and then About Face, and then like On an Island.
About Face is good. It's kind of in that same 80s vein as Momentary Lapse of Reason. And in some ways, I think it's actually better than Momentary Lapse. But, you know.
Well, there was no expectations tied to that record apart from being David Gilmour, right? Like, as soon as you slap the Pink Floyd sticker on it, it comes with a whole lot more expectation than just one guy from Pink Floyd.
You like Pink Floyd? We got one of them.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed. Again, like, in the past for me, I know you're a lot more open-minded when it comes to, like, era of production. Like, sometimes I find things like, you know, the 80s drums and 80s sounding stuff a little hard to get into. I mean, that was the one thing at first with Radio Chaos that I was having problems with, is getting past the just how 80s it sounded, right? Whereas the album before that kind of holds up.
Sounds a bit closer to the Final Cut.
Yeah.
Pros and Cons does.
But I've been sort of ignoring that and just realizing that by this point, it's just what 80s records sounded like. So you get over yourself, Tyson, and just listen to the music. And I've been finding it quite like enjoyable, quite rewarding.
Well, not all 80s albums really sounded exactly like that. Like 90125 by Yes, that didn't really sound overly 80s. I mean, there's no real...
There's a lot of 80s in it, though.
Yeah, but there isn't, like, plinkety electric drums and that kind of, like...
Leave it.
Well, okay, leave it aside.
A little bit.
Good point, good. Okay, yeah. But for the most part, that particular album doesn't have quite the plinkety-plink digitized sound.
No, they'd save that for the next one, Big Generator. So by the time you got past that midpoint in the 80s, like, everything from, like, 1980, we'll say to, like, 1984, you still kind of had that late 70s production quality. Like, they weren't using a lot of effects gates on the drums. Like, the drums still sounded basically like, you know, you'd mic'd the drums, maybe a little room reverb, but when they started putting, like, gates on the drums and, you know, instead of a snare drum going, like, it's, you know.
That was sort of Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel started that.
Yeah, I blame them with the reverse gate drum in the air tonight, and then everybody had to have that Phil Collins sound.
But then, that started, though, on Peter Gabriel's third solo album, because that was where Phil Collins was drumming, and Peter Gabriel and him kind of came up with
sort of
that.
developed that sound.
And Hugh Padgham as well.
Yeah, Hugh ended up working with Genesis on, like, most of their big 80s records.
As well as Peter Gabriel 3,
yeah.
I believe.
Oh, thank God the Beatles broke up when they did, because I don't think I could have fathomed that. Ringo having the gated 80s drums,
Well, they would have still had another 10 years in which they could have broke up. Because
Yeah.
the gated drums were 1980.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess we did sort of get a little bit of that with the Threedles, Free as a Bird, and
Well, that was
Jeff Lynne.
That was his thing. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, but then not even. That's not unprecedented. Listen to Cloud
9. Yeah, George Harrison's album. Ringo's all over that, and that's a good example of, you want to hear what the Beatles would have sounded like in the 80s, when we were fab. That's a pretty good...
But I love hearing songs like I Got My Mind Set on You. That's just a really happy, fun thing to listen to.
I remember that the summer that came out, that was I remember Bad, when Michael Jackson was on the radio, and I think that was the summer my parents and I went to, we took a road trip to Nova Scotia, and just every radio station, and I remember my parents going, I'm sick of this stupid Michael Jackson song, but my dad loving George Harrison, because he's a Beatle.
I'd say they had a pretty darn good track record, though. I mean, they never really made a absolutely terrible album.
They never had a chance to, because they broke up before they made their Dirty Work, before they made their Summer in Paradise,
I'd say if they had carried on, though, then all the bickering and all the getting sick of each other probably would have led gradually more toward a lower quality of work, even just still in the 70s. Because, eventually you go as far as you can go, and then that's it with these people. You either take a break and come back later, or you say that's enough.
And I mean, the thing about the Beatles is I don't think they couldn't do what other bands did that lasted longer. In that, I don't think the Beatles could, because they were such strong personalities, even Ringo, that, a Beatles with Jim Keltner just doesn't sound right, or a Beatles with Klaus Voormann, or a Beatles with Harry Nilsson, like take a band like Yes, who've had a bazillion different lineup changes.
Yeah.
And they've been manning, they almost swap out every band member, once every 10 years there's a completely different lineup that has some tenuous grasp of previous lineups, but the fact of the matter is that their longevity is based on the fact that they can keep getting kind of fresh blood rotating in and out, or guys that have been in it that haven't been in it for a while. I don't think the Beatles could do that, per se.
Well,
again, because they're just such strong personalities. Whereas you get a band like Yes, where every new guy that comes in brings something to the table that makes it even that much more interesting. To a certain point, I'll say, recently, the John Anderson fake, John Davison.
There does come a point where even the new ideas start to not feel so fresh. But with the Beatles, at least, they were like a TV show that knew when they should have their final season.
Yeah. Yeah, there wasn't like a 10th season with a cousin Oliver, bring a little cute little kid in because Rudy isn't cute anymore, so they have to bring in a little Raven Simone as the new cute Rudy.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't. Oh well, we decided we're gonna put some hip hop in the song, so we ended up getting Chuck D to come in and lay down some beats. That's an interesting trend in music now. Is like they actually the new insert guitar solo here is the new insert hip hop. The new hip hop beats. Yeah. No, throw in like a rhyme in the middle in your pop song. It's not complete.
Didn't Rush do that on Roll the Bones? So that's another sign of the 80s.
It doesn't always work, Sean. Sometimes progressive rock is the progressive part.
Well, you never. I'll give Yes this. You never, ever do you hear John Anderson rap, or Trevor Rabin. Never.
Yeah.
They did use hip hop beats on the song "State of Play," but there was no rap. It was just sort of the rhythm that they happened to have in mind to do the song.
And was it lightning strikes to get a little bit of EDM in there? Get a little bit of.
Well, there's even a Kink sample on that one.
Yeah, Phenomenal Cat from one of my favorite records. The Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society.
But again,
Which I have right here.
But again, you still never hear Yes rap.
And
which is good.
I hope we never do, to be honest.
I guess even Phil Collins never rapped in Genesis.
Yeah, no, I don't think he did.
The closest he did get inspired by rap, because on the song Mama, that whole ha 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 was apparently Grandmaster Flash, and then the way he sang the song, apparently he put a little bit of that John Lennon sneer. I saw an interview somewhere where he was talking about that. And so it's Lennon sneer and Grandmaster Flash makes a song called Mama.
That was a song that took me a little, I'll be honest, took me a little while to get into, like, as a Genesis guy. I mean, Sean and I are both, like, big prog rock fans, too, so...
Mostly of the old school variety.
Yeah, like, I've sort of kind of dipped my toe into, like, the Steven Wilson kind of stuff, and later stuff like Fish. I got one, well, Fish from... Marillion, not Phis, like...
And not Chris Squire's nickname.
Right. And so, like, yeah, I only have one Marillion album, and I Googled the best one, and it's Misplaced Childhood. And I liked it, but it just sounded like it's very Genesis derivative. Like, if Genesis went into the 80s with Peter Gabriel, but still had Hackett in the band, like, that's kind of what it sounded like.
Classic Genesis entered the 80s.
I liked it. Don't get me wrong, but I could definitely hear the influences. But yeah, it's like the 80s were not good to some of these older bands. I think Yes got a pass and Genesis got a pass because they progressive rocked themselves into pop, like, but successfully. It wasn't like a blatant, hey, let's switch styles.
Well, the way Yes looks at the whole 90125 thing is it was the next evolution of the band.
Yeah, it was kind of, it organically happened by accident.
Yeah, because it started off being a whole other band named Cinema once they got Trevor Rabin involved, because they were Squire, White, Rabin, and Kay were just doing this music, and they thought, well, okay, we'll call it Cinema. And then, so they proceeded as planned. But then, the record company and Chris Squire was talking to John Anderson again, and then suddenly it was like...
I was just about to ask, like, I forget how Anderson got involved in the project, like...
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, basically, Sean Sheppard of the British Well Basically Club. Well, basically... yeah, they were recording the album as it was going to be known as Cinema. But then Chris Squire, apparently, and John Anderson got back in touch with each other. And so Chris played John, I think, Leave It or something, and said, well, here, we got this new music. Would you like to have a sing on some of this? And John's like, yeah, okay. And so... He did, and as the story goes, he went into the studio and he sang on things and maybe developed some of the ideas a little bit, pretty much last minute, and purely by just listening to it with John singing on it, it was obvious that it should be Yes. And of course, Trevor Rabin maybe had his reservations about it, because he thought, wait a minute, we're doing this new thing here. This is...
Trevor Rabin being the guitarist and the new kind of principal songwriter for the Cinema.
Yeah,
Sorry.
He didn't join the band to be Steve Howe's replacement. He joined a new band. But then... And that later on led to a lot of, sort of friction between Rabin and Anderson, but it didn't last forever. They eventually came to an understanding and made albums like Talk later on. And now they're touring the world with Rick Wakeman as ARW, and that seems to be working out well. And they've got a respect for each other, and they're friends now. So you can start off in a band kind of standoffish with the new guy, but then eventually as you get to know each other, but even Big Generator, I think there was friction with them plus Trevor Horn, who was the producer of, well, he produced 90125, and then he started off producing Big Generator, but because of friction, he even didn't get along with Tony Kaye. But because of friction, he left the sessions. And John Anderson, at one point during Big Generator, was told, don't come in until we need vocals. So he had time to go and record other stuff, to work on other projects with Vangelis and Three Ships, his Christmas album. And
it's kind of weird that, really, because Trevor Horn initially came into the band as this replacement singer for John Anderson.
On the Drama album.
And he wound up being the guy, like, telling him what to do.
And John's like, well, okay, I thought I was trying to help us develop things here and show you some ideas. But okay, I'll just sing and earn my paycheck.
Yeah, go home.
And that eventually led to him leaving the band after Big Generator and getting together with 4 guys who used to be in the band. Bill Bruford, Rick Wakeman, and Steve Howe, to make an album called Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, Howe. And I don't really want to get into the whole story of Yes here, because that's...
Well, it's interesting. Speaking of Steve Howe, I've been listening to some Asia as of late, due to the passing of the late, great John Wetton. This guy was a sort of bass player, singer extraordinaire. His pedigree goes all the way back to, like, King Crimson.
73 to 5 King Crimson.
He did a couple albums in a band called UK with Eddie Jobson and Bill Bruford's on the first one. I'm trying to think who else. Alan Holdsworth, another guitar player.
Eddie Jobson, or am I wrong?
No, Eddie Jobson and Alan Holdsworth was the other guy in the band. And then they swapped out drummers with ex-Zappa's Terry Bozzio for the second record. So I've been listening to sort of a lot of that, and it seems like Steve Howe doesn't seem to, like, get along with a lot of people. Like, he seems to be kind of a persnickety, I want my guitar like this, and it has to be like I was listening to an Asia song, and I forget the name of it, but it is on the first album, and the intro has Steve Howe's guitar so far back in the mix, like gradually throughout the intro, it's like the guitar fades up and it comes in with the rest of the song. But he must have been pissed to be like, why's my guitar so quiet? Like, honestly, a good example of kind of the Steve Howe, the worst parts of Steve Howe are like some of the funniest Nigel Tufnell stuff in Spinal Tap. Yeah. You know, like, this guitar cannot be played. Yeah.
Like on the Union tour, he had to play alongside Trevor Rabin. So Steve was like kind of trying to say, you know, he'd hear Trevor Rabin play something that Steve was supposed to play. He'd go, no, don't do that. You can't play that. We'll find a bit for you. You know, like, don't double me on. Don't double me on that. Here, do this.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where on Yours Is No Disgrace on that tour, they'd have, on, you know how on Yes songs, Steve goes off into that little solo bit that isn't on the...
Yeah, just like this is a live showcase bit.
But, so they'd have Steve do that, and then they'd kind of do a little bridge, like da 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 da, and then Trevor would get his chance to sort of do a shred fest in the middle of the song before it goes back to the actual song part.
There was a lot of egos and stuff involved in that band too. Like, as Rick Wakeman would say, you know, there's a lot of, like, you know, you got 9 different management companies, 9 different record labels.
8 or 9 publishers. And the lawyers.
And the end is listless, as he says.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a miracle that something like that could happen. And of course, not surprisingly, it was short-lived. So we've talked quite a bit about everything and nothing in terms of music for this week. And on that note, I'm Tyson.
I'm Sean.
And this has been the Music is the Best podcast.
With Sean and
Tyson. Thanks.